stick with the fishbowl and we test and prototype using this fishbowl process.
Okay. So we'll do the fishbowl technique, and I'm very happy just to go with the first comment. And as I said at the beginning, everything's an experiment, so we're always learning. So if I can ask people, apart from Davey and Erica and Philippe and myself to start with, to turn your cameras off. That just means we kind of, that's how we're going to work with who we know is in the fishbowl. And when you want to come into so Philippe, you can turn your camera on, please, and Mario, if it's possible for you to turn your camera off, just using the for most of us it's the stop video button in the bottom left of our screens. So there we go. Philippe, can you turn your camera on if you're with us? Or maybe we'll just start with the three of us. So we'll just start a conversation with Davey and Erica about what's been coming, and Philippe about what's been coming up in the Google Doc. And then in a few minutes, I'll kind of open up the space and say, does anybody else want to join the conversation? And if we imagine if it was in real life, it would be coming into a chair in the middle of the room. But the way we're going to do that here is just we'll turn our cameras on at that point that somebody wants to join the conversation. But we're going to keep our, to give it a bit of discipline and to give plenty of chance for everyone to be involved, we're going to keep our comments pretty brief. So I'm going to try and encourage, we'll begin with just a reaction from the three of them to what they're seeing across all the document. But I want to, after the beginning, I want to keep the comments pretty brief. So just a brief comment and maybe a question to add as well. So should we start with you, Davey? What, when you look at the document, what particularly strikes you? Don't try and talk about everything, but just what comes across as particularly striking or particularly interesting for you?
Well, from the document and from our breakout conversation, I can see patterns of similarity emerging in the challenges of hosting in dialogue or participative processes at the local level. So I think the big one for me still is captured there is the getting beyond the usual suspects. I've been working on transition and permaculture type projects, and we keep attracting permaculture and transition types. How do we mainstream these critical ideas around resilience and regeneration now that have been held by these sort of movements into the mainstream? So I've seen that as a pattern. I really like the way Philippe broke it up into the social and the cultural challenges, and maybe just highlighting what Philippe based or started with was the challenge really of the power brokers, the purse string holders, the local authorities and municipalities actually trusting local dialogue and seeing the strength of that without losing power. So we need win-win strategies for the people that, as Erica said as well, that we need to potentially be working for local authorities and municipalities to hold in these sort of processes that they don't potentially maybe have the experience or the capacities or competencies or methods to deliver. So I see some shared patterns before we dive in, and I'm ready to dive into thinking about how we respond to them and sharing potentially how we have responded to some of these challenges. So, Erica, what are you seeing?
I like it. I like your pattern approach as well. Thank you, Davey. Yeah, looking into it, I see a lot of energy around bridging the community level to the political level. So like the political challenges are many. So that so there was a lot of questions around, and that's similar, I think, linked to what you're saying on how to mainstream, maybe. So this would be like, how to bridge this public dialogue with the processes with the political sphere. And then linked to that, it's not really here, but I would also link it to something that came out in our smaller group, which is how to implement how to go from dialogue to implementation, because that can also sometimes be a sense of frustration. And here I can see like different ways forward. I don't know if now is the space, but yeah, I could see some interesting tensions around there. And sorry, maybe the third one, what jumps out is the idea of scaling up and or accelerating these processes of dialogue, right? So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you, Erica. And I'm going to ask you to come in as well, Philippe. Just yes, can we build on the patterns we're identifying? So the moving beyond the usual suspects, how we bridge into the political, how we move to implementation, how we scale up and accelerate. What would you like to add to that, Philippe?
Est-ce que Chris, tu fais allusion, tu parles de la montée en compétences, de l'acquisition de compétences, de la formation, c'est ça dont tu parles?
I think it's scaling up and accelerating the whole dialogue practice. Yeah.
Ouf, alors, la question est très, très large. Je veux bien commencer par peut-être donner quelques éléments sur la question de la formation, de la compétence. Je pense qu'il y a, je le pense, et c'est aussi le résultat du travail de l'équipe à laquelle j'appartiens, puisque non seulement nous travaillons pour animer des processus, pour faciliter du dialogue, mais aussi pour former des gens au dialogue. Et donc, nous pensons et nous essayons de mettre en place des formations au dialogue à trois niveaux différents. La formation au dialogue je dirais de base, qui est vraie qui s'adresse à tous les citoyens, à toutes les personnes qui sont susceptibles qui sont intéressées par le fait de résoudre les problèmes collectifs par le dialogue et non pas par la confrontation. Donc ça, c'est une formation de base au dialogue qui met l'accent sur les méthodes de communication, l'écoute, l'apprentissage de l'écoute, le savoir-être dans un collectif, etc. Ça, c'est vraiment très large et c'est des formations qui doivent être courtes. Deuxième et troisième niveau, ça s'adresse à des professionnels. Le deuxième niveau, ce sont des professionnels qui sont en activité dans des associations ou bien dans des collectivités territoriales, c'est-à-dire dans des administrations locales, ou bien dans l'État, même dans des entreprises privées, et qui mènent des projets et auxquels on apprend à mettre en place des projets, à résoudre des problèmes auxquels ils ont à faire face par le dialogue. Et donc là, il n'y a pas seulement besoin de se former à la communication, à l'écoute, etc., mais il y a aussi besoin de se former à la conception de dispositifs de dialogue, c'est-à-dire à l'architecture des étapes et des espaces où on va dialoguer et avec qui on va dialoguer. Ça, c'est le deuxième niveau. Et le troisième niveau, c'est la formation de personnes qui vont se dédier complètement à la facilitation du dialogue, voire à la médiation de conflits, donc des professionnels spécialisés qui donc vont avoir un niveau approfondi de connaissances et notamment qui doivent apprendre à gérer les situations de crise, les situations de conflit. Donc, c'est la combinaison de ces trois niveaux qu'on déploie depuis plusieurs années pour arriver à transformer, à transformer la culture du débat en culture du dialogue et aussi à donner des compétences aux professionnels pour qu'ils soient capables d'animer ces processus-là.
Thank you, Philippe. And if I can just say welcome to Siduni, who's joined us as well, who is, because he sent me a personal message, I can see he's a doctor in the sociology of the environment from a university in Algeria. So very, very much concerned with the business that we're talking about today. Davy or Erica, do you want to build on what Philippe was saying in relation to the role of training or the potential of training in helping us develop our work on dialogue?
Yeah, I see it as a really essential piece, both in the way Philippe's framed that, training for citizens in active listening, in dialogue skills, in understanding why we need to come together and dialogue, raise ambition, and look forward to resolving issues or setting up initiatives to deal with the challenges we face. So I see that as important. And then also the professionalization, the need for the municipalities and the people that are given the task to engage local communities and local community groups. They also need training in why, and I love the way you framed it there, why they need to solve problems and initiate initiatives through dialogue. I love that, Philippe, and I think there's something really important there, raising the ambition for what we need to do and bringing all voices into the conversation for the future of that place is so important. And I can see, I suppose, that linking to other challenges we've identified, or, you know, the moving out of the usual suspects, you know, and designing our dialogues to be attractive, to be relevant, and to get the engagement they need. I think it's starting to lead in that direction and follows up on what Eric was saying about the scaling up. And, you know, we are going to scale up by having more professional practitioners. And it's one of our objectives of the community climate coaches is finding a new vocation for permaculturists and facilitators and animators and community catalysts that are currently not supported. So we see the training that we're developing over the next year as being key for the practitioners to be more skilled and able and have the capacity and competency to host and run dialogues. So yeah, I think similar patterns being addressed there. Erica.
Okay. Thank you, Davy. So I don't know if Erica wants to come in, and then we'll go to Mario. And just to explain how the fishbowl's working to everybody. So we've got 5 of us who are in the middle with our cameras on. And if we imagine that's like 5 chairs. And if anybody in the middle kind of feels that they finished being in the middle for a while, just turn your camera off. So, and then we know there's a space, as Davy's just done, and that means somebody else can come into the middle, and we'll just take it in turns and try and keep it as, you know, 1 comment, 1 question, so we keep it moving, we keep alive. Erica, and then Mario, and then we'll see what happens.
Great, super. No, really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Philippe and Davy. And maybe to build upon, yes, we need training, absolutely. And who do we train? Okay, so here I don't know if people know Jean-Paul Lederach, but he talked about the critical yeast to activate the critical mass, just like making bread. Social change processes need catalyzers, right? So then it makes us question, like, who is a community catalyst? Who are the people we need to really zone into, identify, and start training to start replicating and accelerating or scaling up these processes, which are 2 very different processes, but I actually think both are needed. And one of the roles so there's 10 key community catalyst roles that we've been able to map in our rural communities, but one is called an enabler. And it makes me think, because it's someone usually in public administration who is open enough to open the door for community groups and community-led processes to get funding or to be listened to. So I think that could be interesting as to like, who are the enablers? There's a couple other roles as well, but that for this conversation, I think that would be really relevant. I'll pass it to Mario.
Just before you go, Eric, well, not that you're going, but if you might put the reference, the community yeast person, put it in the chat.
I can certainly put that in there. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Mario, welcome.
Merci. Je voudrais faire une question à Philippe Barrette. Parce que Philippe, est-ce que tu as des expériences, des dialogues dans lesquels tu as une participation, entre guillemets, massive de nouvelles générations? Parce que moi, les expériences que j'ai essayé de faire avec les nouvelles générations, dans différents domaines, si tu veux, étaient toujours très négatives.
Philippe, would you like to turn your camera on and join us back and talk about the, so good. You heard Mario's question, so that the involvement of different generations.
Malheureusement, je ne me souviens pas avoir eu une expérience qui soit destinée particulièrement aux jeunes. J'ai pas d'exemple en tête, et je pense que c'est évidemment une question importante. C'est un des secteurs qu'on voit pas trop dans les espaces de dialogue, mais j'ai pas travaillé spécialement là-dessus. J'ai pas d'expérience. Tous les processus de dialogue que je mène sont plutôt, il n'y a pas un critère d'âge, donc je peux pas. Voilà, bien sûr, s'il y a des jeunes qui viennent, c'est bien, mais je sélectionne pas en fonction de ce critère. Enfin, il n'y a pas un effort particulier qui est mis sur cet aspect-là. Je suis désolé.
Okay, I can say something on it, but Davey, you came in. You're muted at the moment, Davey.
Sorry, Chris. I'm interested in hearing Mario's experience, if you have any experience in resolving that challenge, Mario.
And also Celine is asking in the chat who is considered the younger generation, which is, I don't know if Mario has an answer, but obviously it's a relative concept. Mario, do you want to talk about your experience and your needs? And you're muted.
What are the new generation? The new generation are Greta Thunberg, Friday for Future. When you look to their way to communicate, their way to motivate people and create synergies is quite impressive. It's a little bit different from my and Philippe, Dave, and Chris, and generation. Probably Celine can have a different experience. We are, as a generation, able to create a vision. We start on writing, probably with a pen or with a computer, to draft something, to think, to discuss, to have the impact and inputs from others, and slowly create what we consider our vision, our aim, our topics or elements to reach. The new generation doesn't work in this way. They act immediately. It works again. It doesn't work. We don't make any comments, verification, criticism. We start from another path and we look if it works. This creates really a huge way to create conditions for a dialogue. we create a specific dialogue on soil and future for soil in Europe. We had a web meeting last year, exactly in June last year. It was extremely difficult to have participation and generation. We reached at the end the possibility to have someone from the Friday for Future, but we had at the same time at the cell level all others. It means we had politicians, we had people who were dealing with buildings, farmers. So all were in equal position in order to create good dialogue conditions. And the dialogue was, of course, feasible. But to get the people, the young generation involved in the dialogue was extremely difficult, more than to have people that we consider enemy. When you talk with builders, and they have only to use the soil to create highways or to make small or huge buildings on top. With Friday for Future, they have not only difficulties in relate to all actors, but they have a difficulty in relating to people of different generations that don't use the same instrument to communicate. This is the experience we had. Sorry. If Celine has a better experience, I hope that she can share positive elements.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Mario. So I'll just come in with a little bit because I have some experience in this area as well. So and it'd be great if you want to come in as well, Celine. So one of my experience, it's just the two of us. One of my experience, three of us again. One of my experiences that's worked really well is beginning intergenerational conversations by actually having people split up in their generations. So the way I usually do it is really, really simple. So I have you're either younger, older, or middle, and people can self-define so that we're not too labeling. And in those three groups, the first question people work with is, what would you like other people to understand? Or, what would you like other people to understand better, or some version of that. And then we have each of the groups talks about what they'd like other people to understand, and then they present that back to the whole session. But it starts from a basis of, we all want to understand each other. And nearly always what happens is the young people speak very, very powerfully, but they're also very struck by actually how much the other people care and how much the other people do actually want to do the work properly. So anyway, that's my experience as a way of beginning intergenerational conversations that can work very well. Celine, do you want to come back in, or if that's okay, Davey? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick intervention to say, I don't have a very large experience, but I guess this is never a question that I ask myself, probably because just as Erica was saying before, you find some enabler in a municipality that opens the door to decision makers, for instance, and probably it's the same thing that I'm a rather young person, I guess. So I have around me also contacts with people that are this generation, let's say. So it's never happened that in the dialogue spaces in which I've been involved, we had people in different age ranges, from usually 22, 23 years old for the younger ones, to over 65 years old for the older ones. So this has not really been a problem at this point, but I'm assuming that also my age is a driving factor. It probably makes it easier for me to reach out to people around my generation, because I'm already part of this generation, so probably it's also easier. So getting people, these enablers that Erica was mentioning, maybe a good way to reach out to a community that's more difficult to reach out to. And in the same way, maybe you have difficulties reaching out to younger people, I will have difficulties reaching out to other types of participants.
Yeah, no, thank you, Celine. And that really reminds me that when we set up core groups to do these pieces of work, there's always this idea that the core group should try and reflect as much as it can the diversity of the people we want to involve. Davey, and just say if anybody else wants to join in, we've got a couple of spaces if anybody else wants to switch their camera on. Davey.
Maybe just to reflect on this fishbowl. So, Chris, you explained it earlier, but I think it's quite hard to imagine it in the virtual space. Much easier when we're doing this dialogue process physically. But we are trying to keep a conversation with 4 or 5 people with our cameras on. And so we're invited, there's 3 spaces now for people to join that little bit of conversation. If we always leave a space, then more people can join and participate. So it is an experiment, as Chris said, so we'll go gentle on ourselves for not maximizing its potential, but it is an interesting process. I think this is a really good challenge, not just engaging younger people, but engaging people that we don't normally see at these dialogues and these sort of, what will be more important, these local forums or discussions. Ireland has had some success at a higher level with the Citizens' Assembly, and that will have youth voices brought in as part of the mix, and also potentially, especially the way that Mario's talking about it with the new young climate activists. So we're currently in a biodiversity Citizens' Assembly, which has had youth processes feeding in. It'll have youth in the Citizens' Assembly, the citizens are selected. But that's at a high level, it's quite controlled. And what we're interested in is this local level dialogues or regional or territorial dialogues, and using this new, or using a fresher participative approach, engaging people in the decisions, the policies that will affect them. And I suppose in the just transition, there just won't be a transition unless we engage these marginal voices. So youth, and sometimes older people, different ethnicities, making sure there's good gender mix. Now, the way I've managed to do this in the limited experience I have with Open Dialogues is to adapt the World Cafe to be stories and conversations, and select a number of stories from different sectors that at least their voice is represented now, and maybe even safer for them to join this event, because there's going to be voices from the youth or voices from sectors that we don't engage with. So the stories ignite the conversation in smaller groups as well. And we can come out into the bigger group and hear reflections, and maybe even go back in for a second round in smaller groups with a different group of people. So that's one way that I've started to address that challenge, is by inviting participants we don't normally see to actually tell a story and to play a part in this dialogue. So maybe we can invite some more people to come in to this conversation in the center of the room. There we are, Justin.
So you're very welcome to come in. So we've got stories, and I was talking about the processes that try to make sure people feel heard and understood. Justin, what's interesting, and what would you like to add?
I wanted to just add setting, consideration of setting and space, because if I talk about specific examples of what I've been trying to do on the farm in the countryside, it's maybe not so applicable to many people, but to bring it back to a more general concept, that I think the setting is so important for this intergenerational engagement. So to try to super generalize, then one thing that seems to be working after some years is to try to make every event attractive to families. And this is like then you're getting diversity of age in one car. And this has been quite effective for us, and it's also been a really effective way of having like we spoke earlier about how to engage with the mainstream or the non-permaculture heads or those that aren't already into these topics. And at least here in Estonia, it's usually only one person in the family who is into these topics. And if we have a children's program and a practical element to our event, then we get the family. And a lot of these dialogues for us, if we try to make any formal context for a dialogue, we will not get a diversity of participants. But if we just make more active space with activity or something, and also a children's kind of area or section, then these dialogues happen in a much more casual kind of setting, and very happily, sometimes very often across big generational or background kind of gaps. So I think setting is incredibly important. And I would love to hear other stories people have on this or ideas.
Well, I want to build on what you said, Justin, in the breakout in the smaller room, which sort of relates to setting, and it's bringing in the balance between celebration and the event or the education or the dialogue. And I think there is a lot of merit in thinking about how to make it more convivial and have some shared food. Bring in some music or arts to change the tempo, maybe to even, we've been using spoken word poetry to provoke the discussions and the conversations, which has been really quite successful, I think. So I think there's really something in there. I don't know if you're still there, Christian. You mentioned something around artists. I'm quite interested in the role of the artist and the creative in helping us engaging people at the local level in dialogue, in action, or openly anyone, if anyone got any ideas.
So there are a couple more chairs in the middle if anybody else wants to turn your camera on and join the conversation. Celine, welcome back. So yeah.
Thank you. There was room, so I just
you're
used
great.
it. Now, just to add, it's not really about art so much, but we have an experience on building dialogue spaces about renovation of public buildings. So how to involve the community into defining how the renovation of these buildings is going to take place, how it can be relevant in terms of uses of the building. And we've been using some 3D modeling and building blocks, which helped a lot in engaging people, because talking about building renovation without being actually able. So it also relates to what Justin was saying about settings. And if you cannot project yourself, so it's not so much art, but somehow it can be related to it. Saying, okay, how can you grasp using, for instance, art or modeling or this kind of even toys such as building blocks to also help support these exchanges. So yeah, that was just an input.
Before you come in, Christina, can I just build on that? Because we had a consultation with our local community when we were building this Ecole village. We were planning 130 new homes in their village. And so we had to do a year-long community consultation process. And the part that we designed with the 2 schools was using planning for real. So it's taking that approach, Celine, where we got the 2 schools to build a model of their village. And we used that model for 3 sessions with maybe 100 people, just using it as a talking point, no agenda. And so I really, just to resonate with that, that's really strong, using modeling or mapping and getting people engaged about what they appreciate or what's strong in that place can be really strong. But Christina, you come back in and hopefully maybe someone on the arts, because you mentioned it briefly in the breakout. So.
Génial, Céline, merci beaucoup. Because actually my project is about renovation, and what if we could use the need to renovate housing to address all the different challenges of our transition. because it touches on all the different, on the social aspects, on the financial aspects, on the ecological aspects. What if we could only use what we already have in the French have this wonderful notion of territorial, which doesn't exist in English. But in this Pays de Morlaix, very confined and much smaller than you would define a bioregion, for instance. But what if you could only use the people who are here, the material that already exists, as in reuse or biomaterials that have grown on this very land. And the artist comes in that when I first came up with my idea for a project, he just told me, this is too abstract. You know, people are busy, people have their lives full, you know, nobody will participate in this. And then we were just bouncing around ideas. And I mean, the strong role of artists is that they just bring a completely different perspective in. And they can be a bit like the court clown, the entertainer. So people are very forgiving for anything an artist actually brings. So you can get away with an awful lot of things. And so we just came up with this idea of co-creating a tiny house that floats and rolls. So it needs to have wheels, but it also needs to be able to be on water. So the sea, for instance. And this is something that people found really exciting, because now we can go around and ask them, so what stuff are you regularly throwing away, you know, in your business, for instance, and what are the things that, how do you imagine a simple life on very limited square meters? What are the essential things that need to be in those few square meters, and what can you do away with? You know, what would you do away with? And so it gives us an inventory of what's already available in the territory, and it gives us the different ideas people have. So we then let them design their vision of their bar or school or whatever it is we're talking to, as we call it TMX, the tiny house of Morlaix. And then they can either build with the waste material they have on site themselves, or they can ask the artist to build a model, a tiny model of the expression that they have designed. And we just hope that through this process we will get much more buy-in from people, because they get curious, and it's a weird thing, isn't it? I mean, what kind of weird people suggest a house that floats and that rolls, and then they really believe they can build it next year as a real thing, and it will go through the area and visit the different streets. But that's exactly our engagement tool. And from there should flow a whole dialogue program around what are the needs in this road, for instance. Who lives in the right place? Who would need a different solution? How can we help each other? How can we connect through the heart to have those difficult decisions and innovate solutions, because national programs just don't cut it. They're just too far away, and they're just not holistic enough. It's too complex. It needs to be dealt with on the ground.
Brilliant.
We have a lot.
Thank you, Christian.
I was just going to say, we have a lot in Ireland now that's sort of encouraging creative placemaking and getting artists and creatives to sort of lead local resilience projects or community co-housing projects. And that's really an interesting thing. And maybe just to add, is part of what we're seeing is a crisis of imagination, and that potentially in these dialogues we're trying to help the community imagine what a better form of their self could be, what a resilient place that they're in could be. And so it is finding ways to break open the imagination, which is our role of an artist. An artist can help us, you know, challenge in a different way what is currently the status quo, and help us see what we might have difficulty seeing. So I think there's something that ties in with what both of you were saying there, Christina and Celine.
So we're coming towards the end of the time that we've allocated for this session. So there's another 7 minutes according to my clock. So if anybody else wants to turn your camera on, this is probably the last chance you have to come into the center. I just wanted to mention as well, I think it's really wonderful that the new European Bauhaus project that I'm sure some of you will know about, that has the tagline, sustainable, beautiful, together. And I really like so it's I think quite similar to what Christiane was saying. I really like their focus on beauty. And there's lots of, if you go into their website and look at their case studies, there's lots of examples of projects that have started from a point of view of appreciating what is beautiful, you know, what is beautiful or what could be beautiful in our place, which is a really good place to start from.
I think there's a connection there, Chris, to someone mentioned in our breakout group, you know, that as well as be beautiful, what is good living as a question to get into dialogue for the place? Because I don't think, and this crisis of imagination, that we even can imagine what a sustainable lifestyle will be. We think it will be back to toil and hardship rather than warmer homes, better food, supporting local economies, meaningful work in our places. And there's a lot of work, I think, to creatively help us see what good living and a well-being economy, say, would be, you know. So all of that can be done, as Philippe says, through dialogue. We can increase the ambition and set our sights further and identify the strengths we have in this place. Yeah, so there's a lot there.
Thank you. And I was just seeing Vanessa's put some things in the chat there about a project in Scotland, looking at how designing strategies for a more sustainable future there. So thank you for all of that, Vanessa. Maybe just looking at the time, if I could invite Erica and Philippe to turn your cameras on, and if you have any kind of closing reflections of what's been coming up for you. And then before we finish as well, we'll ask if Marina might say a few words about what's going to happen next. But maybe Erica and Philippe first, maybe.
Yeah, maybe just a very short reflection. I was really enjoying this kind of artistic approach, and also it was linked to what Justin was saying in terms of storytelling, you know, and also what Celine was saying about these kind of localized participatory approaches. And I think there's something really, really important and not to lose when we're doing these dialogue processes, and it's really important to be ambitious. But if we approach it as storytelling, you know, like what is the story of your community, and base that dialogue process around there. We've done that many times, and it's so enriching and engaging and bridging as well, because it's something that everybody can rally around, you know, politicians, business leaders, human rights or community activists, leaders, school teachers, etc. So there's something really, I think, quite lovely and juicy there. Pass it on to Philippe or Davy.
We'll say Philippe. Philippe, do you want to make any closing reflections?
Oui, je veux bien avec plaisir. Je me suis permis cette dernière minute de regarder à nouveau notre tableau, le tableau que nous avons rempli ensemble. Je trouve ça vraiment riche, intéressant. Je dirais que, alors il y a plein de choses dedans, il y a plusieurs défis qui ont été traités. Je pense qu'il y a deux défis qui sont un peu laissés de côté et sur lesquels pourtant il me semble qu'il y a beaucoup à réfléchir ensemble. Je vais revenir d'abord sur le défi politique. C'est cette question qui a été abordée de deux manières. Il y a une question qui a été posée dans la dernière colonne, je crois, le dernier défi, je regarde rapidement, c'est le défi 9. Comment assurer que les décisions collectives soient mises en œuvre. C'est aussi cette même question du rapport entre le dialogue et la décision. Et je pense qu'encore une fois, c'est un sujet stratégique sur lequel, si on veut donner de la puissance politique à nos espaces de dialogue, il faut réfléchir cette relation et voir quelle est la stratégie qui convient. Donc ça, c'est un point qui me semble devoir être beaucoup plus approfondi. Alors, il y avait un autre point aussi que j'avais remarqué, je regarde rapidement, c'est la question de la pérennisation, de la durabilité des processus de dialogue, qui a été posée dans le défi numéro 7, je crois, à laquelle on n'a pas trop répondu, il n'y a pas beaucoup d'éléments, il n'y a pas d'éléments. Alors, il y a la question des moyens, des moyens financiers, mais ce n'est pas la seule question. Je pense que la question principale, c'est la question de la… alors, du coup, je vais le dire en anglais, puisqu'en français, empowerment, the empowerment of people to make them able to lead themselves dialogue in the future. Donc, ça veut dire que on se soucie de peu à peu, en tant que facilitateur, transmettre aux communautés locales la capacité à continuer le dialogue entre elles avec les décideurs. Donc, ça veut dire qu'il faut penser, quand on intervient, il faut penser la transmission de cette compétence. Ça, c'est vraiment transmission de la compétence et aussi penser la gouvernance, comme on dit en français, c'est-à-dire la façon d'organiser dans la durée le dialogue entre les acteurs. Ça aussi, c'est une question que nous, on aborde systématiquement à chaque fois, parce qu'on sait qu'on va rester 6 mois, 1 an et demi, mais qu'après, on s'en va. Et donc, il faut qu'on laisse sur place une organisation qui va poursuivre le travail de dialogue, parce qu'évidemment, il ne s'arrête pas là. Il doit se poursuivre. Voilà les deux sujets qu'il faudrait, je pense, approfondir parce qu'ils sont vraiment stratégiques.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Philippe. I really appreciate that and really appreciate everyone's contributions. Do you want to have a last word, Davey, before we go to Marina, just to finish us off?
Yeah, very quickly. I think we can see there's many different reasons for doing local dialogues or territorial dialogues, and we need different skills. So there's a training of society and the decision makers and the importance of dialogue, as Philippe said. And then there's the training and resourcing of local community catalysts that myself and Erica are working on with our community climate coaching. And we're actually learning a lot from the coaching world. Once we have led the dialogue, created a resilience plan that can potentially be coaching and moving into a different, slightly different approach. So this has been a rich experience. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully we can do it in a bigger format and continue this important conversation. So thanks.